Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to briefly comment on what's been said here about the zero emission zones. As I already said, my name is Laurent. I represent FEBAC, which is the Belgian and Luxembourg Federation of the Automobile and, as you mentioned, cycling, also the motorcycles industry. So it's cars, light duty vehicles, trucks, and motorcycles. I have a few comments and maybe two preliminary comments. And indeed, the harmonization of the low emission zones and zero emission zones is absolutely essential. There are quite a few of these zones now in Europe, across Europe, and also in our region. And it's very confusing, increasingly confusing for citizens. It undermines citizens' trust in an harmonized Europe, and in some way, it also it creates barriers for the internal market for the free movement of people and goods. So we do believe that there is a need in the future to harmonize these rules so that they're increasingly transparent for citizens and for enterprises. We also think that increasingly the problem will be at the level of the existing fleet. As you may know, there are rules for new vehicles being put on the market in Europe, both in terms of CO2 and on air quality. There, in fact, the European Commission and the European institutions are now reviewing the CO2 objectives for 2030. For passenger cars and light duty vehicles within the framework of the Fit for 55 package. So we do expect that the fleet of new vehicles will decarbonize fairly rapidly in the future. However, we do expect that there may be a problem with the existing fleets on our roads. And especially, and I will go into more detail later on, but the private cars are a main concern because they're most affected. The rotation speed of company cars is much higher on average. They're much younger, so we do expect an electrification of company cars in Europe much faster, but the private cars are an issue, and we can definitely something we need to discuss. We in Belgium, we do some at FEBAC, we do forecasts for the Belgian market and the fleet on how based on a number of models, and I won't go into too much detail now, but if you'd like to have more information, you can always get in touch. We do expect some significant evolutions in the next couple of years, and if you only look at the Belgian scenario, the federal government changed the rules for company cars at the end of last year, whereby as of 2026, only new zero emission company cars will benefit from the current taxation rules. So as a result, we do expect that gradually, as of 2026, all company cars in Belgium will shift to electrified or to electrification. And by 2030, most of the company cars in Belgium should be zero emission or battery electric. In fact, that transition has already started today in the new orders intake. Now, if we compare the fleet of company cars with the fleet of private cars, there's a big difference. We do expect in our models that the private car owners will not buy electric vehicles in the next couple of years, and definitely not before 2030, or at least they will do it, but much more slower for two reasons. As I mentioned, the rate of turnover, it's much slower of cars. The average age of cars for private cars is much higher than company cars, but also because we do expect, especially based on the latest data and prices increases in raw materials, in energy, etc., we do expect that for the next couple of years, battery electric vehicles will remain out of reach for most private citizens. For private citizens, it's the purchasing price that is the main trigger and the key element. It's not what we call the total cost of ownership, which looks at tax deductibility and write-offs. That's something that's very common in the business, in the B2B environment. It's very common for companies, but it's not something that is applicable for private citizens. And it's a major issue. And we do expect this to become an increasingly important issue in the next couple of years, because it will affect the middle and lower incomes much more than the higher incomes. So it's a societal discussion, it's a social debate, but we think that zero emission zones may be highly divisive. It could be discriminatory and even antisocial, even at the 2035 horizon. It's something we as a society must think about and how to deal with this. That's one point. And the second one is, of course, the whole debate on infrastructure. It's nice to talk about objectives and decarbonization. Of course, they also talk about how to get there. And I just used two examples that I know quite a bit, especially, of course, under the Brussels situation. But quite interestingly, Amsterdam wants to have a zero emission zone by 2030, if I'm not mistaken. And Brussels has an ambition by 2035. I'm not going to read all the figures on the slide, but it's very clear there's a huge difference in level of ambition. And of course, if we want to decarbonize, it's really important that we also speed up the deployment of charging infrastructure. It was already mentioned by the speaker. It's absolutely key, and maybe I can end by saying that if we want credible objectives, we also need credible policies. So we need to step up the ambition to roll out public and publicly accessible infrastructure. It's not just for cars, but for vans, for trucks, for taxis, for buses. We need fast charging infrastructure, and we need a lot more of it. And also, of course, we need the grids that can deal with that can transport the electricity, and we also need to beef up green electricity production. Thank you very much.